The San Diego Chargers are a really interesting team because after their 2013 season, where they found a way to get into the playoffs and then win a playoff game on the road and then really stick a game to the Broncos in the divisional round, many people were expecting more of the same, if not even better, for the Chargers in 2014. And then they started off the season 5-1, and they were looking at that point in time like maybe the best team, not just in the AFC West, but in the AFC, if not the entire National Football League. And then things kind of came unraveled and a bit unglued. They went 4-6 the rest of the way. I mean, they still went 9-7, but you start off the season 5-1. You hope to finish better than 9-7, and you hope most certainly to at least reach the playoffs. But that's something that the San Diego Chargers failed to do. So now heading into the 2015 season and the 2015 NFL draft, there's significant questions about whether this Chargers team is really all that close, whether this team is ready to take the next step, or maybe it's time to take a step back and start thinking about the future, especially as they explore the possibility of moving potentially to LA down the road. So a lot of questions about the San Diego Chargers team right now in this organization. It's a very interesting offseason for them and will be a very interesting draft to watch for them. Now, in terms of the recent draft history, they've done okay by themselves, not great, but okay. Corey Liuget has been a stud for them, their former first-round pick from a few years ago. You look at 2013, a draft class that was pretty weak. They did pretty well with DJ Fluker in the first round, Keenan Allen in the third round, and I think they'll get more out of Monte Teo, their second-round pick out of that draft to come. But they've had some bad misses, too. They've missed on several mid-round picks, guys like James Mouton and Marcus Gilchrist and Vincent Brown. Um, you know, you miss on that many second and third round picks, that eventually starts to catch up with your organization. And I think you could see that with the Chargers, a team that lacks depth on both sides of the ball. You also look way back at their 2010 first round pick, Ryan Matthews. While he wasn't a scrub in the NFL, his 5 seasons were checkered largely due to injury problems and then some problems with fumbling the ball as well. But when you look at what they gave up to move up the draft from 28 to 12 to draft him way back in 2010, you just don't ever think that they fully got their money's worth when it came out of Ryan Matthews. But they still have some questions, too. You look at their 2012 first-round pick, Melvin Ingram. He's never really been much of anything for them. He's been a guy that's had trouble staying on the field. You look at their 2014 draft class with guys like Jason Verrett and Jeremiah Tauchu, guys that I like, guys that I think will contribute more going forward, but they didn't give the Chargers much in this first year. You know, will guys like them and Chris Watt be able to step up and be valuable contributors going forward? That remains to be seen. And the Chargers were somewhat busy in the offseason. They addressed some areas, namely depth at wide receiver, by bringing in guys like Jacoby Jones and Stevie Johnson. They know they needed some help on the offensive line, in particular on the interior. That's why they signed Orlando Franklin. They brought in Patrick Robinson to bring some depth to the corner position that they needed. There are also some big losses for them, too. Again, they lost Ryan Matthews in free agency. They lost Eddie Royal in free agency. They lost Nick Hardwick due to retirement. So this is a team that right now, you know, coming off of back-to-back 9-7 seasons with the disappointment of the finish from last season, where does this team go? And what is this team going forward? And are they really close, or are they a lot farther away than people envision? Well, in terms of their needs for this year's draft, I look at their biggest needs being first on the offensive line. They need to address the interior of that line, both the center and guard positions. You know, right now, Phillip Rivers is the face of that franchise. Right now, you have to do a better job of protecting him. Their run blocking at times is suspect in 2014, and their pass protection most certainly was suspect in 2014. And if Phillip Rivers wasn't better at evading pass rush in his face by stepping up and moving around in the pocket, you would see just how bad that offensive line was. I can't tell you how many times you would watch the Chargers in 2014 and wonder how the hell Phillip Rivers was able to get rid of the ball. Because it seemed like he was always dodging, he was always weaving, he was always having to move around. And at some point in time, that's going to catch up with you. They must beef up the interior of that offensive line, and they must also beef up at the skill positions. You know, Keenan Allen took a step back in 2014. You know, Antonio Gates isn't the youngest spring chicken anymore. How much more are you really going to get out of him? So you really need help in particular outside at wide receiver. You need a speed option. You need a true number one where maybe Keenan Allen's better served as a number two. You could also use a big-time running back. Now, does that merit necessarily a first-round pick? I don't know. But in a draft class that is deep and loaded at the running back position, the Chargers would do well by themselves, at least by the end of day two, to have gotten some type of running back to go with the combination that they have in the backfield already. They need more. They need a replacement for Ryan Matthews. They could also use some depth on the front seven of that defense, most notably outside at the edge rusher and also inside at nose tackle as well to pair with Corey Liuget and Kendall Reyes on that line. In terms of the philosophy, though, this is what it all comes down to with the San Diego Chargers. This could be one big media hype, or it could be a situation where there's smoke, there's fire. It is time to figure out whether it's time to prepare for the future and start thinking about long term as you might transition your organization to going to Los Angeles? Or do you think you're close enough where it's time to go for it now and you really need to go for it now? And what I'm ultimately referencing is what they're going to do with Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers is only under contract through 2015. Now, granted, the organization could potentially keep him there for at least 3 seasons because they could have the ability to franchise him both in 2016 and 2017. Or they might be able to work out a long-term deal with him. But you're also talking about a Philip Rivers who's going to be, 34 years of age this year. Even with Philip Rivers, a legit franchise quarterback, top 10 guy in the NFL, some might argue a top 5 guy. You still only finished 9-7 the past 2 seasons. So you were one of those teams that actually had a quarterback and you still only found a way to win 9 games each of the last 2 seasons. So how much better could you really get around Philip Rivers in order to change that and affect that? And how much better are you really going to be with a Philip Rivers as now he starts to enter his mid-30s and may perhaps enter into the twilight of his career? Do you really think Philip Rivers is the guy that can deliver you a championship? If he is, then you have to build around him, you have to help him out, and you have to go for it right now. But if you don't, and maybe it is time to explore the future. Maybe it is time to explore going in a different direction. Maybe it is time to explore trading him to the Titans to go get a guy like Marcus Mariota. Now, in some ways, I would understand that. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't know if that's the right choice at the right time. Because like I said, the Chargers have a lot of leverage here. They really do. If Rivers wants to continue to play in the NFL, the Chargers could have him locked up in their organization through 2017, whether Rivers wants to play there or not. So they could keep him all the way through his age 36 season. They have the leverage right now. Philip Rivers does not. And this is a team with the Broncos, not being as good in 14 as they were in 13 and maybe even taking a step back in 2015. The Kansas City Chiefs kind of toiling away in the middle of the road and the Oakland Raiders still a long way from really being relevant and contenders. There is a window of opportunity there for this team to at least win a divisional title. And then once you get into the playoffs with a guy like Philip Rivers, anything can happen. So at this point in time, I would anticipate or expect that they keep Philip Rivers, at least for the time being, and that they try to load up around him. But if they are going to keep Philip Rivers, then they need to help him out on the offensive side of the ball. They must beef up that offensive line in this draft, and they must get him more to work with at the skills positions, namely running back and wide receiver. Because otherwise, if you sit there and keep Philip Rivers, but then you largely address the defensive side of the ball, I think you're missing the whole point, and you're looking at going 8-8 or 9-7 again, and missing out on an opportunity because, again, you are one of the few teams in the National Football League that actually has a real franchise quarterback. How could you have that type of guy and still finish 9-7 the past 2 seasons? There's a lot of questions in the next couple of weeks that the San Diego Chargers will have to examine, address, and ultimately answer.